2, 1. This is the Hero Podcast. My name is Ryan G from the Netherlands, coming at you live. Well, life as far as life goes, with my co-host, the real Pete Kirkwood. Pete, what are we going to be discussing today?
Fantastic, Ryan. Thanks for that, man. I'm really excited to get stuck into the second episode. And on the first episode, we started talking about, what is a hero? And I wanted to go a little bit deeper in a way that people can get something from this episode that they can take to use in their lives. So I wanted to talk about the power of the philosophy of Stoicism. Not Stoicism as in you look like you have a stone face, like you look stoic. I'm talking about the actual philosophy of the teachings and understandings and how they make a good base for heroic character that is very, very flexible. So the way I would really put that across is to think of the great Stoics in history. So, for example, like who would be a Stoic that you would identify with? Pick one for an example, and we'll start with them.
I would love to start with Epictetus, for the reason of his quote, "You might fetter my leg, but you cannot break me." I love that quote.
That is a great quote. You can fetter my leg, but you will not break me. And I believe that the myth, whether it's true or not, says that the slave owner, to prove the point, kept pushing on Epictetus's leg until it broke, and he was only a young slave at the time, and he said, "See, now I'm useless. You've broken my leg." And it really does speak to those Stoic virtues. So, man, he was such a paragon. The thing about Epictetus which stands out for me the most would be breaking it down to the 4 principles. Is the principle of self-discipline and also justice, but self-discipline. And self-discipline, the Stoics would say it was temperance, right? But what that essentially means is holding yourself accountable. So it's not easy to work out every day, but it's good. And we do that. We hold ourselves disciplined. It's not easy to turn down those lollies, but we know those lollies are not good for us, so we turn it down. That's self-discipline. It's about having that control of your own self. And Epictetus, starting out as a slave, often had to keep himself well controlled because life's not kind to a slave. Your master breaks your leg on purpose. And you're so self-disciplined that you say, "See, look, now I'm useless." That's heroic. Like, that is superhuman levels of self-discipline. Most people would just, my leg, I'm scared. You broke my leg. What have you done? Like, how could you be so mean? That is what we think of as normal. So even if he was crying and bawling, even to say, "Well, now I can't help you, I'm useless." Like, even still, that communication is powerful. And I mean, I think actually I'm just going to expand from Epictetus for all of them. When it comes into justice, about doing the right thing, as he rose in recognition and fame and power, he would always turn away those honors and things which were not necessary. And he would treat someone the same who was keen to learn if they were a slave or if they were a rich man's son. It wasn't about the fact that the rich man's son could just come in and buy their way into his school. He was about teaching the people who are absolutely on to learn the right thing, Also wisdom. Over the years, he accumulated a lot of wisdom and he lived it through his life. He acted and lived in a way that was wise, where he wrote practically nothing. In fact, I don't think he wrote anything. The only reason we have a record of his teachings is from the Enchiridion, which translates to have close to hand, like a Bible or an instruction book or a manual or a reference book. And it's a reference book for how to live life. So it really says a lot about the character of the man that the book his student named after him, because the book was written by a student in his class, was called the Enchiridion, saying this is what you should have close to hand. And Epictetus was just demonstrating how to live. So the fourth principle I haven't touched on is courage, and courage is often just the action part. You've used your wisdom to work out what is the smart thing. You've looked at justice to make sure it is the right thing to do, regardless of the consequences, that it is virtuous and that it holds value not just for yourself, but for your community. You've acted with self-discipline from not acting on your own desires, but remembering to restrain that and act in the greater good. And then you have to take action. That's where courage comes in. It's that you know what's going to happen if you do that? That moment, really? Oh, are you sure you want to do that? That's the voice. Oh, are you sure you want to do that? Just before you grab that spider, just before you charge that dragon, just before you open your mouth to speak the truth in a room full of people who are all agreeing to lies. Are you sure you want to do that? People aren't going to like it. They're not going to be happy. That's where that courage really weighs in. And I love seeing it more and more as the world's changing and things are going on. I see a lot of people who are not afraid to put their hand up and say, hey, I'll give it a go. Hey, I'll try that new thing. As the world's turning beneath us, a lot of people are becoming more fearful and more afraid, and they're seeking more security. But other people are going, you know what? If the world's going to turn, I'm going to start walking. If it's going to start moving, I'm going to start moving to counter it. And that courage is the first thing. It's that first action in a direction, which is really powerful. And no one can say Epictetus didn't act. He definitely kept pursuing things. Like he kept moving and didn't hesitate. And his wisdom, touching back, like these four virtues, it's almost impossible not to weave them into each other. It was passed on and on and on that people would come from far and wide. It ended up a copy of his notes, I believe, and things ended up with Marcus Aurelius. So it shows how it was valued and handed down. And those four principles, they sound almost old-fashioned and they sound almost too simple. Having the self-discipline to hold yourself accountable, to be doing the right thing, which leads into justice, of doing the right thing for the sake of it, regardless of the consequences, which leads into wisdom of knowing what the right thing is to do by taking the time and the effort to put time into study and learning and valuing knowledge and wisdom. So when the time comes to act, you can have courage to complete that process and to follow through with those virtues, turn them into physical action, physical reality in the real world. So that's a bit of an overview of the four Stoic virtues. Is there anything that you'd add to that, Ryan?
Yep, I can add a lot to that. Let's take a martial arts perspective. All these four virtues are being practiced when you follow, let's say, regardless of whether it's modern or traditional martial arts. Because to embody your philosophy means to practice what you preach. And there's a perfect example within martial arts where you have to practice your philosophy. The technique is simply the technique. The punch is simply the punch. The kick is simply the kick. But it's in moments where you have your opponent, regardless of what their skill level is, in a hindering position where you can easily snap their arm or their neck. It is where you need to show restraint. It is where you need to show wisdom to the situation. Is where you need to have the courage. Fantastic! You have demonstrated courage that you know your stuff, that you can confront any willing opponent of whatever level, and now you should demonstrate the other three as well. Have the wisdom to see, wait a minute, according to the bigger picture, the higher purpose, there is no reason to snap his, shoulder out of sockets. There's no reason to do that. It will only feed my ego, and something like that is a fleeting thing. Might as well drink some coffee. It's the same idea.
Correct.
Mm.
You know, the consequences, you know, justice says that it's not the right thing to do, and the consequences won't be the right thing, you know. um Often even the real part is the opposite side. When you're facing very negative scenarios, and the easy thing to do is the wrong thing. Like when you're in a position where he's trying to snap your arm and you're tapping out and he's ignoring you, what do you do? Do you start kicking and flailing and screaming like a child in that moment because, you know, it's not good? Or do
Uh,
you say, hey man, like, are you really going to be that much of a dick and break my arm? Snap. Not cool,
well,
bro.
I,
Not
I
cool.
I think it happened to me almost a few times. I have really flexible shoulders, so it really helps. But I have been in that position where I figured if I didn't have these flexible shoulders and he kept on pushing, I think we would have easily snapped my shoulders out of the socket. And it made me realize how important having a clear mind is. There's something that's also very important within the context of these four virtues. When you're fighting, it's very easily to get emotional, and I've been guilty of it as well, especially when I first started with wrestling and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Fighting on the ground is extremely confrontational because I'm used to, kicking and punching, going in, going out, creating distance, creating a play. Now, the play you create on the ground is way different. At the half, especially because of my weight and height and the country I live in, everybody's bigger, stronger, faster. So I need to be smarter and more about, my purpose. Now I know I'm
Yeah,
going to lose and I need to be okay with that. There's also the principle of I accept and acknowledge where I am in the here and the now, in what I can control. What I cannot control is his actions. Well, to a certain extent, I can because it's still a fighting art. Is to
sure.
use the power of another to benefit you, and to take your example of what if you're in such a position where he's completely full of adrenaline. Then I simply ask myself, do you think he's a good person? I would say, I think he is. And it's probably because his adrenaline is so shot up that he can't think straight. So instead of like with a pit bull, agitating him more, relax. Because tension, it's easier babe, to break an arm under tension than to break an arm that's relaxed. So ease in the moment and try to remember your way out of it. And my answer was, if I cannot tap, let's figure out a way to ease the pressure off my shoulder for just a little bit until the time runs out. Time ran out. I took him on the side and asked, why didn't you let me go when I tapped? What's going on? Let's confront the issue in the here and the now, which is very confronting for me as well. And then I
Mm.
found out, I was right. He was so into that moment of, yes, I got you. Where, of course, I could easily blame him for, yeah, you should have had more self control, but here's the thing, I know I have no power over that. I've been in so many fights. I can control what he does and thinks. I can trick him into doing things, in making
Mm-hmm.
mistakes, etc., because it's like a chess game.
Mm-hmm.
But I've in that moment, I've had to accept worst case scenario, I'll have a good story.
Yeah, like I see you're coming from, and it really, it's often easy and fun to talk about those Stoic principles in the positive, right? Do the right thing and being wise and being just and honorable. But it's when it's dealing with the negative, you know, when you're on the end of somebody treating you badly and he's like, trying to snap your arm off and he's not noticing you're tapping or something, right? For example, too much adrenaline. The right thing to do in that scenario, well, long term, what are the consequences of you acting up like a child to get out of being injured.
Yeah.
Your reputation and your standing in the dojo and in the fighting community and the thing, because it's a sport, you know, it's a purpose. This isn't a street brawl. This is different. So for you to break character, right? Break your hero's character, break your thing, and to flail around and cry and scream like, let me go, I give up, like over the top, is maybe, depends on you, right? I can't tell you how to live your life. Maybe that's the wrong decision compared to letting him break your arm. Because if you're there to become a stronger person and a better person, not just fight good or get some physical fitness in, right? If that's what you're sort of after, then maybe breaking the arm's not for you. But if you actually are there to become a master and to really rise to the top of the arts, the difference between everyone knowing that you got your arm broken and you handled it like a boss, like a stoic, and you were like, well, he broke my arm, you know, he was sort of out of line, but there's nothing I can do about that. Versus the opposite side where it's like, oh man, I want to sue this guy and I think he should be kicked out for not playing fair and rah, 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 and that attitude. Like everyone's like, damn man, we feel real bad for you because you got your arm broken, but you're being a dick. Like now we don't like you. So you get the worst outcome from trying to resist and trying to fight, instead of saying, look, the right thing to do here is to be, this is a game, it's honorable, people make mistakes, benefit of the doubt, yada, yada, yada. Let's be manly about this. Let's be stoic about it.
Of course. And I would like to add on that, it's not, the idea behind this is, again, choosing from the bigger perspective. It's about, yes, being about the bigger man, but also choosing when do you surrender to the situation and when do you decide to be assertive, not aggressive, assertive. The confrontation had to be assertive, but I first had to calm down. Realizing that he could injure me, I had to calm down first and look at my options rationally. Could I have done a shorter roll? Could I have done this? Could I have done that? And even to this day, I look back, like there's been a lot of moments where the only thing I could have done was do a quick yelp, just to make him aware, like, bro, this is getting into danger area where if you go any further, my arm will snap, and it can, it it is ridiculous how easily an arm can snap.
It really is. Yep.
And it made me realize as well how dangerous fighting is. I knew it was dangerous. I just didn't know the human body was so fragile, which makes everything just the more impressive how Epictetus, assuming he actually took that punishment, just so powerful. Because it's
Yep.
literally either his leg was crushed or his leg was snapped. In any case, or in any pain, to stick to your character is just powerful.
It is. Like, and it's not easy, you know. I've certainly had moments where I've been there. Like, I mean, I remember the last time I got assaulted and I had to make that decision. Do I give in to this person and like give them my money because they're assaulting me and screaming they want cash, or do I just say, fuck it, I'm not giving you my shit and I'm just going to take the beating? And I was like, well, fuck it, I'm going to take the beating. Why bother? And then all of a sudden they started smashing my shit, and I realized very quickly that the financial, like, for me to be stoic about this is going to be the wrong outcome. The right outcome is to let this person have their win and fucking have their fucking tantrum and calm the fuck down, because they're enraged essentially. Like now they're out of control. I got to just give it to them. It's like, I'm going to let this guy break my arm because it's better that he breaks my arm than he keeps going and actually, like, you know, rips parts of my thing out and seriously damages me worse because
Exactly.
I was, you know, stubborn about losing when I was definitely lost. So in the moment, you have to make those decisions and you have to be aware. And it comes down to being self-regulating. You know, do you feel that you are courageous? Do you feel that you use the principles of wisdom and justice and self-discipline, because the hero isn't to be judged by others. The hero is to be judged by themselves. You know, they're striving to be a better version of themselves against it. And especially when you look back to the Stoics, right? Cato is like such a fantastic man, like Rome's Iron Man, Cato. He always chose to do the right thing, which got him killed. Very few Stoics did that, you know? And it was fascinating to me to see in history that the Stoics stood up to the first emperor, to Caesar, right? Caesar turned up and said, I think we shouldn't have a republic. I think I should be in charge. And the Stoics said, we don't think that's the best for the people. We're going to fight you. We're going to resist you.
Right.
So the Stoics were completely against Caesar. Cato lost. Cato was defeated, killed. Caesar took over. Then what's the fate of the Stoics? Well, you think, well, the losing side never has a good time. Well, the problem is, well, not the problem actually, the success is the fact that they're Stoics. So, well, the good thing is to serve the people. If an emperor is now in charge of the people instead of a republic, then we serve the emperor because that serves the people. It's not like, oh, but you killed our friend. No. The thing that we need to do is we need to put the people first, and we need to work for the guy who killed our friend. That is seriously courageous. That is seriously wise. That is upholding the law of justice and the virtue of justice for the people, not just yourself. That's having the self-discipline to look past your own feelings about your own friend being killed. You know, that transition from Cato to the Stoic advisors really stuck out for me as something I can respect. You know, does that make sense to you?
It makes perfect sense. But what's coming up is one, wow, in that position of having my friend murdered for doing the right thing. It's very confrontational when you ask yourself, would I, as a man, be able to do such a great act? Because I'm not even sure if I would be able to handle that inner conflict of shit. I'm about to embark on a very painful journey, knowing what I know, knowing that I have to embody my own philosophy, my own inner values of these four virtues. And from there, you could always try to have the power to choose, do I give into my emotions and create chaos where chaos isn't necessary anymore? Or do I put my qualms aside and focus on what's important for the bigger picture and deal with my qualms later and really ask myself, is it that my qualms are truly created because of the unfairness of the situation, of something that I perceive as unfair because of my emotions? Or is it because it is truly unfair? And go through that process of contemplation so that I can further uncover weakness that is in my inner character. And through that process, I now see, even though I don't like the fact that this happened, it is now this event, this unfortunate event, has now revealed further blind spots in my character. I did not expect my friend to be killed for doing the right thing. But now that this has happened, it's like expecting an unfortunate event because it's supposed to happen. That's part of life. And life is tricky in that sense because you can't expect it, or you can't expect it in such a way. It's too specific. You expected him to win because he was doing the right thing. But now that Caesar has won, I now know the emperor is about the people as well as we are about the people. Thus, the emperor is we. The emperor is part of the Stoic tribe now. He has become our new friend. And even though he's way different than our friend, we must accept him because he's still about a bigger picture, even though he brings a completely different paradigm. Your thoughts Pete?
Well, that's really it. It's that thing where you have to make that decision, because even if whether the emperor is for the people or not, you have to serve the people. So the best way to serve the people, obviously, was to defeat the emperor. That didn't work. So the second option is to work for the emperor to serve the people, even to maybe make sure he murders less innocents, to make sure he, discredits less laws, does less damage, whatever it is. It's that Stoic damage control attitude. And I think that you raise a really good point, which is sort of getting into the second part about, we sort of say, what makes up the hero? Well, firstly, we have the 4 Stoic principles. And the more you go towards those principles in your life, the more heroic you'll be, right? Like, I can just give that knowledge and that advice to anyone listening to this right now. If you keep those 4 in mind, you stick towards them, it's going to work out for you. The thing is, how Stoic are you? Well, this is where that concept of the hero's journey comes in, right? It's a process to become a hero. Even Hercules was not a hero from birth. He was born with divine right and everything. That didn't instantly make him a hero. He had to do a lot more than that. And I think you can ask yourself questions and things like, I've sat there and I've gone through and I've asked myself, right, okay, I look in history, a lot of these Stoics died for things. And in fact, I'm pretty sure Cato actually declared his war lost and committed suicide. He wasn't actually killed, even though he was aware that assassins were on the way and he wasn't going to make it, and he took the honorable way out and said, I've lost, fell on his sword, Japanese samurai style. And I think to myself, I think we escape this a lot as people. I'm going to die. I am going to die. None of us are getting out of this game of life alive. We're all going to die. So I think, well, if I'm going to die, I'd rather die for something than for nothing. And what would I die for? Well, I probably would die to save a child. I think if the moment came down to it and I had to make that choice, I'm pretty sure I would do that. It'd have to be a hell of a piece of work of a kid for me to not make that decision. Or, like a woman I love, I would die for her. That's just, it seems right to me. So I start realizing, well, hang on, this is true about me. I don't have to try. That's just seems right. I don't think I'd like it, but the more I think about it, I realize, well, the less I think about it, the more likely I am to let myself down, and probably everybody else, in that situation if it arises, right? Like if I'm like, oh, I don't want to think about dying. I don't want to think about dying. Oh shit, I'm about to die. Oh, I've got so much to think about. But no, I've sort of gotten over the fact that I'm going to die one day in my life, and I might have to die to save somebody's life. I might have to die for a cause. I might have to die for something bigger and more important for myself. And it almost seems morbid, but it's the opposite. It's very freeing, because it enables me to say, that's not very important. I'm not going to die. No one's going to die. Who cares? Whatever. And many of the conflicts and dramas and challenges in life are easier to overcome because I can really look at them for what they really mean. And in the big picture, we're all going to die. They're not a big piece. But if my life is pretending I'm never going to die and I'm all focused on trying to make more money this week, or trying to get some girls, or trying to kick somebody's ass in a fight, none of those things are going to help me weigh a real fact of life. Someone I care about passes away. How am I going to look at that in the bigger picture of things? Well, that's part of life. We all pass away. I'm definitely going to mourn them, and I'm definitely going to grieve them, but I sure as hell am not going to do that to a point where I'm not able to be who I am and be of service to other people. I'm not going to let myself grieve that much. I'll do it some other time. Someone doesn't need me, because somebody else probably needs me more right now. And if I'm not going to stand up and be that guy, who will? I didn't have somebody tell me I need to be like this. I just noticed other people weren't. So if they weren't, who will? If I don't stand up, who will? And this is where this heroic attitude starts coming from. You start assessing what's really important. Those 4 Stoic principles, what really matters in life. Knowing that you're never going to be the best in the world unless you go through the journey to get there, and you still might not be the best in the world. You know, there's a lot of people who made being the best in the world their thing, and they're famous for being second or third and never getting number one. I went through school with some guys like that. You know, a guy who was an absolute hard, like he was the hardest worker I knew, and he got second every single year, except the last year where that hard work paid off, and he got first where it counts, right? Straight away, yes, you see that vibe. And he was dux of the school in the last year where it really counts. That's where the scholarship is. So his hard work carried him far beyond many men of higher natural ability, including the guy who always sat number one but didn't work as hard. And man, I definitely had that natural ability, but I sure as hell didn't work hard enough to be anywhere near number one in school. It just wasn't my vibe. So I think even that perspective, I look at who I am now versus who I was then. There's been a lot of change in the last few years, but there are a lot of years with not a lot of change. And that's, who cares? That's the journey. That's my story. Everyone's on their story. You know, I had some feedback from the first podcast episode we did, where a friend of mine was listening to it, and she said, this is so inspirational. You know, and she could see that value in it that inspires her to be a better mother for her kids and to support her family better and to apply those principles, which I thought was really cool. Because the entire point of doing this hero podcast was to just get that vibe out into the world in a way that it affects people. You know, on that note, right, looking at that reflection, we've had a week of this. We've had some time to think about how heroism impacts the world and what we can do on that journey. So I've said that we've got the 4 Stoic principles, and I've said that we've got the hero's journey. What comes to mind over this last week that you've seen, right?
Well, first thing that comes up is self-accountability. It's those low-hanging fruits of negativity that you can start confronting is the first thing that came up. During our coaching call, we've managed to find out different characters that I resonate with. For instance, it would be Uncle Iroh from the last Airbender series, where you had a calm but wise man who is hiding his true skill of combat because there's a time and a place to show off. And Deadpool, who is very similar to Uncle Iroh but has a more mentally crazy, hyperactive vibe to it, the party guy. And yet he also hides his skill until it is time to show his competency in the arts of combat. And I had to confront the things I am most afraid of. For instance, dealing with the nagging of my own mother. It always would trigger a childlike response. And even though I'm almost 30 years old, it still gets to me. And I had to first learn how to acknowledge, okay, this is what it is. I don't like it. I don't have to like it. But I realize this is old programming, and it's not something that per se my parents have caused, but it's in my interpretation of the situation in the past. I believe this is part of her book. I forget his name. A Mind at Ease with Herself. It's your interpretation of the situation that gives the situation its power. So I decided to practice it. Boom, the nagging. Just catch the trigger, Ryan. Catch it. Boom, cool. What is the higher thing to do? I'm being assertive in the here and now, knowing what I know is not the time. It's late. You're tired. You need to go to bed as fast as possible, as you will be not. You won't be able to do the podcast in the morning. So instead of focusing on the nagging, focus on the task at hand. Yes, it hurts. Yes, you're gonna have to learn to grow through this. But as Epictetus said, You may feather my leg, but you cannot break me, because I choose who breaks me. I choose when I'm broken. I choose how I'm broken. And this leads all the way back to, what is the story you tell yourself? One of the stories I tell myself is, if ever I get a chance to save someone's life, someone I love, and I get injured, I am absolutely okay with it. There's this famous story about me how I would love to play with my granddad, the dad of my mother, and because of his obesity and his weak heart, he almost died one day. And I say almost because for some reason I saw him sleeping on uh, my his bed, and wasn't aware that he just got a heart attack, meaning he's in a state of actual coma. He's dying. And
Wow.
me, the little kid that I am, being this hyperactive ADHD kid, before ADHD was a thing, I decided to jump on his chest, and rise his chest like, he's a horse, because that was a game we played. And then he woke up, looked at me like, and he was like, "Oh, why are you surprised?" And then I walked off like nothing happened. And then for a whole week, I got chocolate. I was like, "Oh, this is new. I don't know what I did, but this is new. Why are you guys excited?" Like, "Oh, you're such a good kid, such a good kid, such a good kid." And since that day, this altruistic feeling just kept coming up, but I never realized the true power that a young child of maybe 5 years old had in this situation. And you reminded me of that story where I saved my own granddad's life, not even realizing I had that power. I don't know anything about CPR. I didn't even realize it was a
Wow.
thing. And just by playing our game, I became a hero at an early age by accident.
That's crazy, man. And I see that it's we don't get to choose our childhood, and it's like fate smiled upon you in that moment where the way that it was handled totally encouraged you to be more heroic in the future. It it watered that plant, right, that grew when you did that thing, and you're such a good boy. Here, have the chocolate, have the chocolate. You're such a good boy. You spend the next week being like, cool. Like, even though you didn't really understand, it was watering the seed. If that makes sense.
Yeah, because here's the joke. I thought they wanted me to do more of that. I completely misunderstood the situation, of course. And of course, I got a bit frustrated when I didn't keep getting chocolate, etc. But years later, I started to realize, because we were talking about it during family gatherings. It's like, oh, I remember like small fragments of the situation, especially the chocolate part. But because, of course, I would. But I remember going, now that you've spoken about, memento mori. One day I know one day I will die. And when you
Mm-hmm.
said that, it also reminded me of my childhood and how I saved my granddad. And even though I'm joking, slightly joking about it, I would love to die in a fight, in a proper romanticized martial arts fight. That would be a great way to go. A a
Yeah.
it's so romantic because it is the ultimate presentation of your character. It's a literal physical confrontation between true masters and fighting to the death. One of us will definitely be crippled, but one of us will definitely die. And it's in that mindset I sometimes fight, which is not the best mindset to be in, granted, but it's something so powerful of honorably taking someone's life, not because we have to, but because it's so innate in that here and now. Of course, the opposite is also true. When if it could save someone's life, a young child, bro, the best case scenario is I might get crippled, but there's a story behind it, and I can be proud of it. If I end up as Miracle J by saving the life of a young kid, it is definitely worth it. I can use one hand and see, I can still do my job. As long as I can speak, I can still do my job. Now, hopefully, my
Yeah.
hips still work, but you get the point.
I 100% get the point. And I think that It's interesting. I'd love to get feedback from anyone listening. Flick us a DM, flick us a message, whatever. Like, we love to hear from you guys. I've loved the feedback from the first one. What do you think about this, right? Like, are you the person who would sacrifice yourself for somebody else to save somebody's life? I know personally I would have to weigh the other person. I know I would, but I know how a child weighs, which is why I can definitely just say, yeah, I'd save a child. Another man, well, for example, I would save my mentor's life because I see him as giving more value to the world than myself. But otherwise, it'd be, well, he can save his own life. Depending on
You're making a good
right?
point. A child is easier to carry, and you're not a wrestler. And even if I'm a wrestler, I'm not a big guy. And I like, what do you do when you can do something, but do you risk your life to the chance where you both get injured or die? That's unwise. It's in
Correct.
that moment, like, I can be courageous, but there's also the situation of, what if I fuck up and kill the both of us?
Yep.
And
Like a good example would be, right, if you could imagine, right, the Avengers movie, Captain America has no problem being brave. But you can picture Captain America charging in, picking up an innocent, running and getting absolutely killed and nailed, and the Hulk standing there like, bro, I had that. Why? And it's about that, the right thing to do. It's not trying to be a hero and trying to sacrifice yourself. It's just that knowledge that this might happen. And that sort of gives you a sort of peace where it helps you act because you're not second guessing your decisions as much because you've decided who you are. You've decided how you live. You've decided what virtues matter to you. So in the moment, you're not, oh, do I save a child or and die, or do I let the child die? No time for thinking about it, bro. You're doing it or you're not, right? The person who thinks about it, you've already made your decision. You're not doing it.
yeah,
So it creates that dichotomy. I'll be real interested to hear feedback from people how they feel about that kind of thing. I'm always fascinated by the thought experiment of save a child. It's always really interesting. How are we? I feel like we've been going for ages. How long have we been going for?
I think we're already past the 30 minutes marks, man.
Okay.
I did time it, but I figured this is a powerful topic, so let's riff on it to have a proper ending. So
Okay. So
we'll end it on this momentum mori. One day we will die. So to the listeners and viewers, starting with the end in mind, playing at the level that you're at, how would you like to die? And really contemplate it, and feel free to give us feedback, comments, and because we're also posting this on YouTube, what was it called again? Subscribe, like, and comment, and all that good stuff. We're still learning this. So to hit it off, be the best, fuck the rest. This has been the Hero Podcast 64 because Nintendo 64 is the best game and he's from New Zealand. And
64.
64. It's too bad it's not 69. It would have been funnier. Um, I am Ryan G from the Netherlands, owner of ADS, Aligned Data Strategy. Might change the name at a later date. And of course, the real Kirkwood from New Zealand, signing off live around 7 a.m., 7 p.m. New Zealand time, and 7 a.m. Dutch
In the
time.
Netherlands.
I wish you all the best. May your life never be the same. Good morning.